Welcome to Masterclass Wrestling with Class. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share. Today's guest, Jerry Lynn. Produced by Victoire. Masterclass is sponsored by Clark's Nutrition and Natural Foods Market, serving California since 1972. Football, baseball, golf, whatever your sport of choice, whenever you visit Palm Springs in the Coachella Valley, visit Legends and Icons, your #1 choice for sports bars. Palm Springs, California, Indian Wells, California, Rancho Mirage, California. They're all considered a destination hotspot, a second home haven. With an exquisite record of negotiating the finest deals for clients, Lowell Folsom III and Associates always deliver. Contact Lowell today at 760-391-2504. And now on with the show.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Victoire. Today, I have the pleasure of being able to interview one of the greats. He certainly helped redefine pro wrestling in the 1990s with ECW. Today, he's a producer and a coach in AEW. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jerry Lynn. Jerry, welcome to
Hello. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely, man. As I was saying there, obviously you've been pretty much everywhere, Jerry. You had a very successful career, and now you're bestowing your wisdom to the youth and the superstars of today and tomorrow. But Jerry, let's start with where you began. Let's go back to your childhood. Tell us a little bit about who you were, what some of your dreams were back then.
That's funny because I always say, my wife says, so you got two personalities. You're a Gemini. I say there's probably 6 of me. So I'm always trying to figure out who I am. I feel like I still don't know who I am, but boy, it's a long story. But I'll just say this. My brother and I were adopted when I was 6 and he was 3. And that's the first time I saw pro wrestling in 1969. And I was a fan of it ever since the first time I saw it. So every weekend it was roller derby and wrestling.
Yeah. What do you think that je ne sais quoi is? What is it about pro wrestling that really captivated you?
Wow. I guess when you look at it, it's pretty simple. It's just good versus evil, good guy versus bad guy.
Yeah.
So it's like any action hero movie or, a lot of different TV shows. And so it's pretty much that. And when you really look at it, it's a weekly episodic soap opera.
Yep. Very, very well put there. And
so it gets you hooked.
Yeah, it definitely does. What about in terms of athletic prowess? Were you an athlete growing up?
Yes, I tried a lot of different sports. I wasn't good enough to get scholarships at anything, but I was always, because I was really shy from being bounced around from foster home to foster home, I was always the geeky nerd who got picked on in school. So I was just really shy and quiet. And a friend of mine, I don't know how he did it, he talked me into joining gymnastics one time. And then I loved learning all the different little aspects of that sport. And I wanted it, and in the at home and stuff, you'd go out in the field and play football and baseball and whatever with everyone in the neighborhood and stuff. But after that experience, I wanted to try other sports. So I ended up lettering in 5 sports. Like I said, I wasn't good enough to go to get a scholarship or anything, but whatever I did, I gave it my all. So I ended up, lettering in gymnastics, soccer, basketball, wrestling, and track.
Wow, that's an impressive.
And then in the summers I would play softball. So I always wanted to try a little bit of everything. And I'd play tennis even a little bit with my buddies when John McEnroe and Jimmy Connors were on top. And we just had fun throwing our rackets and stuff and throwing temper tantrums. So
wow, but that's impressive. That's a lot of sport right there. And what about academically? Was there anything else that you may have thought, oh, I'd like to do this when I'm older? Was there anything else, or was pro wrestling it?
When I was a kid, like probably in junior high. I don't know, maybe even younger. Maybe it was junior. I can't remember. You know, I'm old now, but I've been hit in the head a lot. But I always wanted to be a fighter pilot.
Okay.
But then I found out, because my eyes weren't perfect 2020, that was out the window.
Yeah, that's so true.
So, but otherwise, I could never think of anything I really wanted to do.
Okay. So it was really your driving force all through your adolescence. And obviously you grew up in Minnesota, is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, so Minnesota, of course, steeped with wrestling history. All the, the other guys, Kurt Hennig, Rick Rude, everybody came through there. Were you familiar with those guys, or was that in a different town?
No, I since I grew up in Minnesota, and back then there was no cable TV back then, so I grew up watching the old AWA.
Okay.
So until the mid 80s, and then we got cable, and then you could see every territory in the country, which was great. I couldn't get enough wrestling.
Yeah.
But I still didn't think, oh, I'm going to be a wrestler someday. That wasn't even a remote thought in my head, because my senior year in wrestling, I wrestled at 132.
Yeah.
So I was pretty small,
Yeah.
and back then wrestling was still land of the giants.
Yeah. Yeah. What was your max weight when you were performing though? Because you were in the 200s when you were on TV.
No,
No?
no.
Oh,
My heaviest I think I got was 198.
wow. You look
Yeah.
that on TV. Yeah.
Well, luckily TV, supposedly everyone says it adds a little bit of weight to you. So
So what was your first school then? So when did that come about that you actually started getting real serious about it and okay, I'm going to go and train for this? When did that happen?
um a friend of mine started dating a wrestler. He did a Russian gimmick in AWA, Soldat Ustinov.
Yeah.
And so we went to go see him wrestle on a smaller show at a ballroom, and met him after the show and told him, I grew up, loved watching wrestling. He says, well, you should try it sometime. And I said, no, I'm too small. He says, no, come on down. I'll introduce you to Ed Sharkey, and I'll, we'll see what happens. And anyway, I knew I wasn't ready. I was probably 155 pounds soaking wet. This was a few years after high school. And so I just thought, I found out how you get into pro wrestling. That I didn't even know there were schools, and I didn't even know about indie shows at the time. There weren't a lot of, independents running then. And so I just thought, all right, I'll just start working out
Yeah.
again, and put it on the back burner, and in a couple of years see what happens. And so I had a job at the time laying telephone cable underground, and a guy I worked with, he loved wrestling. So we always talked about wrestling, and we actually would go to the gym together too and work out. And then one day he came to work and said, Brad Rangens is throwing a camp together at the last minute. He's taking $1,000 off. He says, you want to do it?
Mhm.
And I'd already spent, since I discovered about indie shows, I've gone and watched a few indie shows. And after seeing some of the matches, that's what made me realize. And I thought, maybe I can do this.
Yeah.
So when he told me about Brad's camp, then I said, all right, let's do it. So I took out a loan for $2,500, and that's how it all started.
Wow, incredible. And I've got to ask you about independent wrestling back then. Was it vastly different from what you saw on TV, or was it very similar?
Well, it was different, of course, in uh, production,
Mhm.
and on an indie show, it was mostly competitive matches. Where TV years and years ago, it was basically a bunch of squash matches, showcasing the superstars, except for maybe one good match at the end of the hour show. Whereas star versus star, but it basically was a commercial for when the big arena show would come to town.
Yeah.
So yeah, indies were a lot different. All the matches were competitive.
Yeah. And obviously comparing and contrasting to today's pro wrestling, it's a lot of character work, a lot of promos. Was it similar back then, or did they focus more on just in-ring competition and storytelling?
No, there was quite a few characters back then. I mean, especially, the first ones that really grabbed my attention was like Mad Dog Vachon and the Crusher and Baron von Raschke. So you always had your characters.
Yeah. Yeah. And then so from there, from training, how long did it take you to start actually performing and earning money on the independent circuit?
Probably 6 months.
Oh,
Well, I don't know. I mean, yeah, I can't remember for sure exactly, but yeah, Brad's camp lasted 3 months, and I didn't feel comfortable yet. I didn't want to go out there and embarrass myself. So I kept going to camp and kept practicing. And I would go to Eddie's camp also and practice there too with his guys. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure I was ready and I didn't want to embarrass myself, which I did.
That's how you learn, right? You get better.
Yes.
So,
Yep. That's how you learn.
were you experimenting with a gimmick, a character, or were you just yourself at the time?
No, no. That's one of the things Brad in camp, one of the guys was talking about the gimmick he was going to do. And Brad put a stop to it right away. He said, how about let's learn how to work first.
Yeah, very important. We hear that so many times now. They put obviously WWF was the real juggernaut, I think, behind the whole gimmick thing. But yeah, 6 months, that's a pretty quick turnaround. So from there, how long was it before you could actually segue from, stopping your day job to where you were earning enough to support yourself on the circuit?
7.5 years.
Okay. Right. Yeah.
But there were times though, like when I think I started in 88. So over the winter of 90 and 91, I went to the USWA territory down in Memphis. So I just threw a few boxes of belongings, mostly clothes, in my car, drove down. Luckily, one of the guys that went through school, Brad's camp with, Tom Burton, he was already down there doing one of the dirty white boy gimmick. And so I just paid him some rent and stayed at his place. And after, I don't know, 3.5, 4 months there, I knew it was time to go back home and get a regular job, support my wrestling habit again, because I went $1,200 in debt. And it was, but it was a good learning experience. So, and then the next winter, I moved back to Nashville and was driving to Dallas every weekend doing global. And then when that started, I'd come back too soon from a broken ankle, and the whole time in global, my ankle was bothering me. So one day I asked Eddie Gilbert, I says, can we get the belt off me? I got to take some time off. And so I moved back to Minneapolis and got a regular job again. And then finally, I think in 95, I'm trying to think how it all went down. I Brad asked me to come down to camp and help him out with a new session.
Mhm.
And I told him, I said, Brad, I guess before that, me and X-Pac and I, when he was still the Lightning Kid, we started going to Japan quite a bit for the Lucha Style Company
Okay.
and for Michinoku. And then finally, when Brad asked me to help him, I asked him, I said, it's been 7.5 years. I said, what do I got to do to get a break? And he says, well, it's different now. He says, it's all about TV. It's all about keeping people from changing that channel. Yeah, I got to come up with something visual.
Yeah.
And that's when I didn't come up with the name, but I came up with the Mr. JL outfit, because at the time the Power Rangers were huge on TV.
That's right.
And no one was doing a mask gimmick.
Yeah.
And so sent all the stuff to WCW, and they said that's exactly what they'd been looking for. But I had bad timing, got hurt, was off for 8-9 weeks. When I came back, they had a dozen luchadors. So now a mask really meant nothing anymore. So
Yeah. Yeah, and I do remember that gimmick because I used to, obviously in England, I would collect the WCW magazines. So I do recall that poster they had in there of Mr. JL. Never would have thought it would have been you underneath that back then at the time. But it was like you said, the Power Rangers certainly gripped my generation, 93,
yeah.
94. So yeah, it made sense. And again, probably ahead of the time. You were ahead of the time there with what you were doing. So how was it in WCW for you? Did you enjoy that working environment?
No, not really, because I'm grateful for it. It was a really good learning experience, but that was the first major company I had a contract for. And when you get to that level, it's a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
And for me, the politics are what ruined it for me. But that's inevitable in any business, any industry. When you think about it, there's
Yeah.
politics, in everything, even the corporate suit and tie world. And,
Yeah.
but that's just a part of life. And and then once again, when I was there, that's when they started the NWO, and you had all the big guns. And I was, just a young kid still trying to get a break. So I knew my spot.
Yeah. But you had worked a few times in WWF before that, correct?
I'd done some TV, did some squash matches there in '89,
Hmm.
like about, gosh, 6 years before it got to WCW.
Yeah.
I'd done a few couple TV tapings, and uh, Tom and we would go set up the ring at the Rochester Civic Center for the AWA TV tapings and do a few squash matches, tear down the ring, and bring it back. So
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very interesting. So, but again, now you were a wrestling fan prior to going into the business. So now when you're there in the late 80s, you're around Hulk Hogan, the Big Boss Man, all the great characters. Was it was the fan still alive with you very much? I mean, because I've talked to some of the other guys how you've got to kind of switch off your mindset. You can't really be too much of a fan because you've got to be a professional now. How did you
right,
find that transition? Was that easy for you?
yeah, yeah, that was really easy because I realized um, it's the thing Brad taught us first day of camp. Professional wrestling, first and foremost, is a business about making money.
Right.
So, um, and so when you look at it, it's really just a job.
Yeah.
But you're just happen to be in another form of the entertainment business. And one thing that really, there was a few things that really opened my eyes. One thing was when I saw Hogan behind the scenes. He was so more laid back, just relaxed and laid back, almost like a laid back stoner, And then I watched him one time. He was behind the curtain, and the minute that music hit and he stepped through the curtain, it was like a switch flipped on, and all of a sudden he was Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then when he came back to the curtain, it was like someone switched the switch off, and that was a
Interesting.
real eye opener. This is just it's a job,
Yeah.
and you can't forget that to turn it off when you come back to the curtain.
Yeah. Now, how is that for you? Because I've been to wrestling shows and I've seen other guys, and sometimes it's hard for them to just switch it off and calm down after performing in front of, hundreds of thousands of people. So was that something of a discipline that you had to learn, or was it easy for you to go in and out?
Well, don't get me wrong. When you have certain nights where everything falls into place and it works perfectly, it's a rush but for me it's a different kind of rush. It wasn't the crowd cheering for me.
Hmm.
It was for me it was taking the crowd on that emotional roller coaster ride, working together with the other wrestler and the referee to do that. It wasn't just me out there.
Right.
There's two other people, or depending on how many wrestlers there are, there's other people out there. So it's not just you.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're out there, taking the people on that emotional roller coaster ride. And when it works on those nights, those are the nights you can't sleep till 5 in the morning.
Right. Yeah.
But as far as a character and stuff,
Mhm.
or or I don't, it's just like Brad told us. It's first and foremost, it's a business. It's not about stroking our egos.
Hmm.
And you go out there and do your job and make your money, and on to the next show.
Yeah. Yeah, for
But
sure.
you'll run into some people who live the gimmick. Well, then it's like, Helen McFly, come back to Earth. Come on.
Yeah. Speaking of McFly, did you hear about that? I guess it was Eric Stoltz when he was originally supposed to play Marty McFly. And one of the reasons they released him from the Back to the Future was because he was a method actor. And he was so into the character that it was doing the other guy's heads in. I mean, that's a British expression, but yeah, he was always Marty McFly. And it was so intense to the point he would not talk to the other cast members outside of being Marty.
Well,
And
I heard Jim Carrey did that too when he was being Andy Kaufman and
yeah,
Man on the Moon.
yeah,
So I guess certain actors, I don't know. I guess that's their way of doing it. Where I don't know. I'm not an I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't tell you if that works for some people, but to me it's like geez, I don't want to say, I still like to protect the business, even though the curtain's been pulled wide open.
yeah,
But to me, it's like if you still strut around in the back amongst the other wrestlers, like you're the shit and you're better than everyone, it's like that's not good.
no, no, yeah,
I mean, no one's better than anyone else. We're all the same. We're all wrestlers.
yeah,
You know,
yeah. You're a part of that team. You
it
mentioned
should be a team. Yes. It's a team effort. It is. You can't have a, like I said, it's not all about one person. It's a team effort. You got another wrestler out there. You got a referee. You got the ring crew. You got the sound guy. You got the audio and video people. You got so many people in the background. And so it isn't just about one person. It's a whole team effort. It takes an army.
Yeah, it definitely does. I've seen the production, and for those of you viewers that haven't, yeah, it's a big production. And of course, it wouldn't be anything without the fans, because without that, you're just wrestling to each other. But you mentioned earlier, Jerry, about being shy. So obviously, this is a business where you cannot
Oh,
be shy.
no, no.
So,
When I first started, I couldn't even look at the people. I would only look at my opponent.
yeah.
And I wish someone would have grabbed me and shook me and said, "You cannot be shy. This is showbiz.
Yeah.
You cannot. You gotta." And basically the thing is, you can't be afraid to go out there and make a fool out of yourself.
Yeah. Now, Jerry, because you've lived it, and maybe there's somebody watching this right now that you could reach and help. So, someone who is shy, what are some of the things that you may have done going back into your mind that helped you break out of that? Other than someone telling you, did you have to practice for a while, or to get over? I mean, any words of advice?
Um, Well, luckily they have me telling them now, don't be shy. You
Mhm.
you have to, if you don't react, if you don't look at the crowd and engage with them, they're not going to get involved in the match. And it's up to us to grab them and get them involved with the match and get them to connect with us. And if you ignore the fans, you're not going to get them to react.
Yeah,
It's that
absolutely.
simple.
Yeah, you've got to get that reaction. So, okay, you go from WCW, so your tenure there ends, and then there's a period in between before you end up in ECW. So, did you go to Japan during that time period? 'Cause I know you went for WCW, right? You went there to Japan as Mr. JL.
Yeah, just once. And then now after WCW, I had another tryout. I had a tryout match with Taka Michinoku
Okay.
on one of those Friday night specials because Monday night got preempted by that Westminster Kennel show. But when that aired, I think Paulie realized that I wasn't under contract anymore, and then he had Candido call me and ask me if I wanted to come in and do a couple shots. So
Yeah. Now, here's where we go into overdrive. This is ECW, Extreme Championship Wrestling. Now, again, forgive me, Jerry, we didn't get much coverage of ECW in the UK. So we saw it in the Power Slam magazine and things of that nature. But obviously, ECW helped revolutionize the business. But it was far different from the wrestling from WCW, AWA. How was that adjustment for you? Because obviously, it was hardcore. It was.
well, it's funny. I always tell this story in when I do seminars too. When I was in WCW, a good friend of mine and I at 2 o'clock in the morning, I can't remember what night, but we would watch ECW. And I told my buddy, I said, that is one company I will never work for because we're watching Balls and Sandman trade chair shots, and these chairs are being dented and destroyed with each other's skulls. That fans are handing weapons over the rail like frying pans and microwave ovens, and they're clocking each other in the head with this stuff. And I thought, someone's going to get a blood clot and drop dead or something. And so it's funny. I said, I'll never work there. And then after I was done with WCW, I I had I was living in Atlanta then, and then after that, I thought, well, I'll move to Orlando in case any wrestling doors don't open up. I could possibly get some stunt work at Disney or Universal.
Okay.
Well, right away, that's when Candido called. As soon as I got moved there, and so I thought, all right. I told Candido, I said, here's how much I want, and I said, and one more thing, and he says, what's that? And I said, I don't want some idiot hit me in the head with a frying pan. And he said, no, 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 we got our brawlers and we got our wrestlers, but one thing at going to ECW taught me was the business is going to continue to change and evolve.
Yeah.
And if you want to survive in the business, you have to be willing to change and evolve with it. But to a certain degree, there are still certain basic fundamentals we should always adhere to, like any other sport. And I still consider this a sport because you do have to be an athlete to be able to do this stuff.
Yeah.
And there are certain basic fundamentals in pro wrestling that we should always stick to that are a lot of it's missing now. But so that taught me there. I knew I was going to have to get hit with the kendo stick. I was going to have to go through tables. I was going to have to let Rob kick a chunk of steel through my skull. No, actually, I learned how to spin off it real fast. I learned how to protect myself real quick. But no, I learned that, I was going to have to be willing to change and evolve with it, but I still stuck to certain basic fundamentals.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, because it was so vastly different. But in terms of so your body during that time, did you receive a lot of injuries and trauma there, or were you able to protect yourself with, good coordination with the guys protecting you, or did you rack up the injuries there?
I had a few injuries there. I had a fractured pelvic bone and a torn ab, and I've had I think I broke, or it wasn't, I don't think it was a break, but a very severe sprained ankle that put me out for probably 2.5 months.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to think what else. I had, oh, the concrete facial on the pay-per-view with RVD that was the third time that month I broke my nose, and that was this landing face first on the concrete wasn't a fun one. So I think I had to take 8 weeks off for that one, because I had like what looked like a Klingon looking plate coming out of my forehead and two black eyes. My nose was 2 inches wide, and I looked like I got hit by a truck.
Yeah.
So there was a few injuries, but
Yeah.
that could happen anywhere, not even just ECW. It wasn't like doing anything different than I would have done in a normal match.
Yeah. And were you a married man at the time? Did you have a fiance or a partner at the time?
Girlfriend.
Oh, okay. So I was going to wonder, like, what was her take on and your family's take? What was that? What their take on ECW?
Well, my family, I think I have, I was, wasn't a very, how can I put this, tight knit family.
Mhm.
But I don't think my adopted mom ever saw me wrestle once. She was too nervous. When I said I was going to go to camp to be a pro wrestler, first thing she said was, "Why do you want to get hurt?" I said, "Well, I don't want to get hurt."
Yeah.
And my dad, I think he just came to like 2 or 3 matches my entire career. So,
Yeah. But no,
but
but
otherwise, what were my girlfriend? What was she going to say? That's what I did to pay the bills.
right. And in speaking of paying the bills, because we've heard rumors and stuff like that. No actual number, Jerry, but were you guys paid adequately, in your opinion?
For where, ECW?
CW.
Yeah, if the check was there all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
the
that was
last
yeah.
yeah, the last couple of years weren't that great, because every other week the check wouldn't be there. But we were trying hard to make this thing succeed and be successful.
Yeah.
But when all reality, when I look back on it, I always thought, because it was an adult oriented product, I don't think there was ever a way we were going to get a good TV deal.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely, like you said, it was extreme. But during that
Yes.
time, were you being solicited again by WCW and WWE?
Um, that's funny, because Paulie one day pulls me aside and says he wants to re-sign me.
Mhm.
And I said, all right. I said, how about for 3 years? He goes, how about 5?
Mm.
And so we came up with the terms and shook hands. And then a couple days later, DDP called and said, yeah, Bischoff wants to know if you'd be interested in coming back to WCW. So I know someone stooged off to Paulie. They were going to call me,
Yeah.
but that was fine. I don't think I would have gone back to WCW, because I wasn't happy with the first time, the way things ended and stuff. And
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely the politics. Now, again, politics and camaraderie. So, what was it like in ECW? Do you have fond memories of that locker room and all the guys
oh
there?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Everyone was watching the monitor. Everyone cheered each other on. You'd come back after a match, and everyone be giving you a standing ovation or whatever. Everyone wanted. We all were working together as a team to try and build this thing.
Yeah. No, it was definitely and again, probably ahead of its time, in many ways. It probably would be accepted today somewhere. But when it came to that close, oh, sorry, before I go to there, some of your greatest rivals, obviously Rob Van Dam, things of that nature. What were the highlights for you before we move on in ECW, match wise?
Oh gosh, I loved my feud with Just Incredible. I loved a lot of the matches I had with Lance Storm,
Hmm.
Candido,
Yeah.
of course Rob. Um, there's so many. It was, but people like to rave about me and Rob's pay-per-view matches. My favorite match was for a TV taping at the ECW arena. I think it was on September 17th or 18th or 19th, something like that. I think I saw it. I think it's on Peacock with WWE's thing, but that my favorite match with Rob was that night at the arena because of the way we had the people.
Yeah.
And the emotional ride we took them on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what's the difference now? And now that you've been in so many companies, in terms of that ECW crowd, have you ever seen anything like that? Because they were rambunctious. They were, have you ever seen anything quite as passionate?
As far as the overall product and the way the crowd interacts and stuff, I think something that's really close would be GCW.
Okay.
Game Changer. Yeah.
GCW.
But and there's a lot of crowds now that are very loyal to the independent that they love, and a lot of crowds are like that now. But GCW comes to mind as they really remind me of what ECW used to be like.
Okay. All right. So now we come to the close of ECW. You hear the news, it's bankrupt, it's done, it's finished. So what happens immediately in your mind? What are you thinking at that time?
Where do I get a job next?
I mean, obviously, but I mean,
Yeah.
what do you like? Are you contemplating, well, what if they don't hire me here? Have you got a backup plan? You mentioned stuntman and things like that, but
No, I didn't have any back. I knew because when I went right before I went, when I said I had that tryout match with Taka Michinoku with WWF,
yeah.
Jim Ross told me that night, he said, "We can't promise you anything. We're just trying to get this light heavyweight thing off the ground." And I said, "All right." So when I first started with ECW, all of a sudden they had the light heavyweight tournament and announced me in the brackets, but they had me and called me and asked me. And so I called, what was it? I told them I couldn't do it because I'd already committed to ECW. I was already committed. And so after ECW, well, even after the tournament was over, JR called me and asked me what happened. And I reminded him, I said, "Well, JR, you told me you couldn't promise me anything. And I already had committed to ECW." And he said, "All right." He understood. And he said, "I just want to let you know, when you're done there, you have an open door here." So when ECW folded, when WWF, they were still WWF, they came to the Target Center in Minneapolis. I got a hold of JR when I found out they were coming, and I had a meeting with him that night, and he signed me.
Oh, wow. And you triggered something there because I just remembered that ECW did a mini invasion of WWF. I think it was 96. Now, remind me, were you involved in that angle? Did you come out? Okay.
No, I was in 96. I was still in WCW.
Still in WCW. Do you know
Yes.
what that was? Because I remember at the time thinking, how is ECW appearing on WWE? So do you know the backstory about what they were trying to accomplish? I mean, was there going to be a merger?
I have no idea. No,
Okay.
I was nowhere near that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So now you're in WWF now, early 2000s. You come in there. I do remember that. So now you've got a complete change of locker room. How did you fit in with the new WWF?
I don't. I think I fit in great. I always try and get along with everybody
Okay.
and try not to have any heat. But the problem there is not long after I got there is when they bought WCW and WWF.
Yeah.
And I mean, now WCW and ECW. And now they had twice as many people as they needed. And a lot of those guys were all the heavy hitters from WCW. And so a lot of them were already big superstars. And so, and I was really on that. I wasn't up on that level yet. And I got hurt 6 months in and I knew I was done.
Okay. Yeah.
I was very expendable. And sure enough, I got fired after I had to get knee surgery.
Okay.
But that's part of the business. It's a tough grind. It's a tough business. And that's just, and at the time I wasn't happy the way it went down, but when I look back, that's just business.
Yeah. Now let's talk about it because you seem like like I said, very down to earth, very nice gentleman. Let's talk about morals and values and things like that and how to survive. Let's share some pearls of wisdom now. So somebody who's trying to come into the business, someone who's trying to come into the business, what would you tell them in terms of etiquette and things of that nature, to how to, how to not get yourself fired, but how to also advance your career? Because there's got to be a fine line there with your attitude with the producers and whatnot.
How to not get yourself fired. Oh, I can't give you a real specific answer because everyone's experience is different,
Yeah.
and everyone's uh, road and to get there is different.
Yeah.
And people say, what do I got to do? It's all a lot of it's timing. A lot of the right person has to see you at the right time and like what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a tough business. It's a tough grind. And when I meet people who say, well, you got any advice for someone who wants to be a pro wrestler? I always say, well, go to college first. So you have something to fall back on.
Yeah.
And then I also tell them and younger wrestlers, you got any advice? I go, you're going to get out of this what you put into it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can't be, you got to go get it. The phone ain't going to ring off the hook. And luckily now they've got the internet and social media. And so you can get the word out about you a lot easier. Years ago, there wasn't any of that.
Right.
So you had to throw your stuff in the car and go drive and go get it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to get out of this what you put in. You got to really want it. Otherwise, this business will chew you up and spit you out.
Yeah.
And I always, like, even when I broke in, like I said, it was Land of the Giants. We're X-Pac. I did his podcast a couple years ago, and we were probably two of the smallest guys at the time. Even on the indies, the guys were big, and it wasn't a very welcoming atmosphere. A lot of guys didn't want to work with us because they thought we were too small. Otherwise, or they would take liberties with us and see if we had what it takes and see if we'd still come back. And we both agree that if we wouldn't have run into each other and had our good 2-year feud up there, we don't think our careers would have gone anywhere. But like I said, you got to really want this. Otherwise, if you don't, it will chew you up and spit you out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely determination and passion. You have to make it everything. I
Yeah.
think I was just having a conversation with my wife last night about that. You can't do something half ass, and you can't do it to 90%. And in some ways, again, I don't want to give anyone any bad advice. And obviously, Jerry, you've been there, done it. So correct me if I'm wrong, but you've got to almost strip out that idea, well, I'm going to fall back on this, because once you've done that, you're dead in the water, in my opinion, because then you've basically said, if I don't, it doesn't matter anyway, because I'm going to do this. Yes, have an idea, but don't keep resting on that crutch. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. And because there's been different times in my career where I've gotten complacent and just fell into, okay, I'll just I never like to do the same exact match twice. I always like to be kept on my toes. But the same moves or the same, I can't really describe it, but and I always would wake up after being complacent for a few months and I'd realize, I got to keep up in my game.
Mm-hmm.
Because especially when I always compare pro wrestling to the X Games, because the moves and the spots become more spectacular and more dangerous every year. And so I realized you can't just stay complacent. You always got to work. You always have room for improvement, and you always got to up your game. And I don't necessarily mean you got to come up with more and more dangerous moves and risk paralysis or anything, but you got to figure out ways to up your game because it's all about getting the fans to engage with you and connect with you and buy a ticket to see you wrestle.
Yeah.
So you always got to figure out what will work. And there were times when I would get complacent and then I'd wake up and go, holy crap, I got to do something different here.
And speaking about doing something different, obviously then you went and you had a successful run with ROH and you were the world champion there. So again, totally different. Now the business is evolving even more because what were the years? It was the mid 2000s you were there, right? Up until like
no, I was at 2002 to 2007. I was with TNA.
TNA
and the extra. Yes.
Correct. So again,
and actually throughout the years, I did the very first tournament for Ring of Honor to establish their first champion. And then I don't know how much longer after that. I had a tag match with me and Samoa Joe against the Briscoes when Cornette was managing them. Then I don't know how long after that they brought me out to the Rexplex in New Jersey and had my first match with Nigel. And so throughout Ring of Honor, throughout the years, they'd bring me in here and there.
Mhm.
And then finally, after I was done with TNA, they brought me in 2008 and 9 for a longer run.
Yeah. And then, of course, TNA, forgive me for that, jumping over that. TNA, obviously revolutionary at the time. They changed the ring and everything else. So, yeah, you're talking about evolving. That was an evolution. And TNA, during that time, I mean, it looked like, I mean, it was exploding. You had all the major talent was there. Mick Foley, Hulk Hogan, everybody was coming in. So, again, you're around these giants. What was it like in the TNA locker room? Would you feel at home again, like ECW days?
I guess, I don't know. To me, a locker room was a locker room. I can't really say it was any different. And it was funny in certain buildings, if the locker room was crowded, I'd set a chair in the hallway and change in the hallway.
Yeah.
But near the end of my career, I'd go do indies, and a promoter would say, "Hey, come on, I got your own room over here." I go, "Nope, I changed with the boys.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never wanted my own locker room."
So it changed. And now, and then when you did go, because you've been working the indies here and there, obviously throughout your whole career, as it evolved in the 2000s and such, what were some of the major differences that you saw back from when you first started in the independents?
Less and less veterans on the indies teaching the young guys.
Mhm.
There weren't as many vets around to teach them, so it was uh that was it. Less and less veterans
Yes.
helping the guys out, because that's how I learned a lot. And whenever I do seminars, I always started out by saying, everything I preach to you, I'm 100% guilty of. But
Mm.
that's how I learned, having another old timer pull me aside and say, "What the hell are you doing out there?"
Mhm.
So I learned a lot that way.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so I think that's what started getting less and less, was less veterans on the indies.
Yeah. And obviously now you're in a position where you are helping the current stars and then the future stars with AEW. You're a producer and a coach. So how did that come about? And how many you've been there since the inception, right?
Yeah.
2019, 2020.
Yeah.
So how did that come about?
Um, when I heard about the rumblings about the All In, which is basically a indie show
Yep.
with the Bucks and Cody and Kenny and everyone putting that together, I realized that my entire career, except for two times, except for WCW and WWF, my entire career I worked indies.
Mm.
I was allowed to. And so I admired what these guys were doing. And I'd met a few of them. And I'd already had wrestled Kenny before and wrestled the Bucks before and quite a few other guys in AEW. But so I called them up and I said, "I really admired what you guys are doing." I said, "Is there any way you could use me as a special guest referee?"
Mhm.
And they said, "Sure." And that's how it all started.
Yep. Put yourself out there. And obviously, I've watched, we're sure we all have followed the AEW product. And there's definitely a distinct difference between it and WWE. And for
There
me,
needs to be.
yeah, there needs to be. And thank God there is. Um, for me, it does, you've definitely got a lot more storytelling. Some of the psychology, I still see it there. That was something I wanted to touch on with you. Obviously, way back, psychology was so important. And but a guy could work on an arm for 20 minutes before doing something. But it was engaging. It was fun. Obviously, the industry's changed now. So in your teaching and producing with these guys now, do you find that you're still trying to bestow the old ways, or have you kind of merged the two together? What's your technique to
I
teach?
merge it. I
Okay.
merge it because there's, like I said, there's certain basic fundamentals we always stick to.
Mhm.
And psychology is the most important.
Yeah.
And so you can still work a body part, but like you said, you have to tweak it and change things. Like you said, we can't do it for 20, 30 minutes like you could years ago. You just have to, especially on TV when you only have so much time.
Yeah.
So you have to tell the story in a more shorter, condensed amount of time. But
Hmm.
it still works. It still can be done.
Yeah, it can be done. And in terms of helping the guys with their character, with their promo skills? Is that something that you also have a hand in now?
Not on a regular basis, but if someone will ask me, "Hey, what do you think of this promo?" or "Can you help me with this I'll help out anyone. Yeah, I don't have to be assigned to someone. If anyone wants to come up and ask me, I'll help them out.
Yeah.
And uh, and I know most of my career, people would say, "Oh, Jerry can't talk." Yes, I can.
Yeah.
It's just no one would let me,
Mm.
and no one would teach me and work with me. They would hand me a printed out paragraph of something I would not say in my entire life. And the one person who helped me the most with promos was in ECW. Near the end was New Jack.
Okay.
I was doing promos, and Paulie will tell you, "Okay, I want you to say this, blah, blah, blah." And Paulie can rattle it off. Paulie's amazing with promos.
Yeah.
And if I'd screw up one word, he'd say, "All right, try it this way." Well, now I'm really confused. And so finally, I'll never forget this night. Paulie says, "All right, we'll stick with that one." And afterwards, because New Jack was waiting for his turn.
Mhm.
And after Paulie said that, New Jack said to me, he goes, "I don't believe you."
Mhm.
I go, "What?" He goes, "Tell me you believed one word you just said."
Uh-huh.
And it just opened up, it made the light bulb go off. And I went, "Oh."
Yeah.
So I just realized after that, just give me the bullet points and let me say it how I would say it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
so I just, I'll help out the guys with the promos if they ask, or if they show me a promo, and I'll tell them how it was or what they could have worked on and stuff like that. And as far as character work, because people say, I can never think of a weird, wacky gimmick for me.
Mhm.
Like I said, sometimes I don't even know who I am, I feel like. But I realized, especially in ECW, you couldn't be that old 80s cheesy baby face anymore.
Right.
You had to be a baby face with a cutting edge, which pretty much means you're a baby face that ain't going to take shit.
Right. Yeah.
But, and I just uh, brought out the metal side in me a
Mhm.
little more and turned it up to 11. That's all.
But it's true though. I mean, I had a conversation with Jake, interviewed Jake, and we were talking about that believability. What made Jake the Snake so believable? Because he believed every word that he was saying. He put
Yes.
himself in the
Yep.
moment. And but again, with promos, now we've heard WWE is totally scripted, and it comes across. It does not seem authentic. How
Yep.
much lenience does AEW give the talent these days?
I think we let them. I think, I don't know. I It might depend on each individual. I don't know, but I think they have a lot of leniency. I think they give them the bullet points and they let them say it how they would say it.
Yeah, yeah, because it definitely. I said what for me that is a big difference between WWE product and the AEW, especially with MJF. I mean, but again, you've got some guys that can talk and
Right.
very easily, but it does harken back for me to the old school when the promos were, I mean, authentic and real, and everyone was. I mean, I believed when Hulk Hogan was talking and Macho Man, I believed them, back then. So.
Well, and it took me years to learn that promo is what sells that match.
Mhm.
It's not your wrestling. That promo is what should sell that match and make the people go, "Holy crap, I got to see this match."
Yeah, yeah. And one other thing I did want to ask you, Jerry, I've never asked anybody this. It's surprising I haven't. But back in the day, we had long programs between, if this guy, I think I was watching last night when the Bret Hart and Steve Austin story, how it started in 96. It culminated really at WrestleMania 13, but it still extended beyond that with the Canadian Stampede. Nowadays, we don't see much of that. It's a
Nope.
short bam. It's a feud that lasts a month or so. So, is there any talk backstage that, I mean, can that work now, or do they want to? Are they ever going to bring that back?
For me, I think we need longer stories because they, like you said, they start and are over before the fans even have a chance to get emotionally invested.
Right, right. What is it?
So long-term stories is important. Well, look at the bloodline. Look how long that was.
Yeah, yeah.
And it became the hottest thing because people had a chance to become emotionally invested. Like I
Yeah.
said, we're a weekly episodic soap opera. And
Hmm.
you can't have a storyline begin and end in two matches.
Right. This is another question I've never asked. So you're bringing a lot out of me today, Jerry. Um, yeah, there you go. You've got it. So another thing is, back in the day, maintaining, saving those special matches for a pay-per-view. Whereas now we're just saturated and inundated. It's like, okay, this week on Monday, you're going to see the main event at SummerSlam, or you're going to see it already. And what is the thought process behind that? And is there anything that can be done to rally the troops and say, hey, let's go back, let's save it for the pay-per-view, right? Let's.
Well, the business has changed now. Like, remember I said it used to be that your TV show is a commercial for the big arena show.
Yeah.
Well, then years later, with the invention of pay-per-views, now it wasn't about the arena show anymore. Now the arena shows and your TV were commercials for your pay-per-view.
Yeah.
Well, now it's even beyond that. Now it's not about that. Now it's about TV ratings.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about that quarterly hour rating and keeping people from changing the channel. So you got to give them good stuff.
Yeah.
And I understand, I would say save the big blow off for the pay-per-view and give them something. You got to give them something extra special since they're actually paying extra for that pay-per-view. Yeah. But you still got to give them great stuff because it's all about TV now and TV ratings and making sure that network's happy and wants to keep you on their network.
Okay. Wow, I got some more questions as you just said.
And also now it's even beginning to change to streaming services instead of a national network, So it's continually changing and evolving, like I said.
Yeah. And then speaking about evolving, another thing that I've thought about for many years, the distinction between an actual main event show, a pay-per-view, and TV. Years ago, obviously WCW was one of the best at this. You could tell what was Nitro and what was Halloween Havoc. The entrance was different. The direction in which the wrestlers came to the ring was opposite on the camera angle. They would change things. Now, one of the things that I think is it's stale is every time the hard cam is at the same location, the wrestlers always come in from this direction, and the entrance is exactly the same. There's no difference.
Yep. My main thing is someone who does the same exact rehearsed entrance every time. Well, to me, if you're in a grudge match, your entrance shouldn't be the same. You should come out differently with a more, more with a sense of what's the word, urgency, and you're pissed off and angry if it's a big grudge match instead of doing a normal, hey, smile for the hard cam and stuff. Yeah, to me, that's one of my main things is every situation you go to the ring, every match puts you in a different situation.
Yeah.
Why is it exactly the same entrance, choreographed entrance? To me, that gets a little ridiculous when it's exactly the same every time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree.
To me, if you're, like I said, if you're coming out for a grudge match against some heel or something, I wouldn't come out all smiley and do the same exact choreographed entrance.
Right.
I'd show the people a different side of me, and make them go, oh my God, he means business tonight.
Yeah. 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 I think back to Rick Rude, when he was in a grudge match, sometimes he'd be more silly and, blow the kisses and stuff like that. Other times when he was serious, I think a match against Ric Flair in '93, much different Rick Rude walk into the ring. Like you said, they took that psychology and with them. Quick question about some of the talent you've worked with over the past few years. Who are some of those that you've really been proud of that you've had a hand in helping shape their career?
Oh, wow. That's a tough one because it's not just me. There's other coaches they have, and I'm still learning. I learn from other coaches still. And even when Jake and Arn were there all the time, I would be stuck and I'd go to them and say, I'm having a hard time with this match. You got any ideas? And so you never stop learning. And so I can't say it. I'm proud of some of the matches some of the people have had, like I'm trying to think. God, that's a tough one. Geez, you got me right. Thinking Tony Storm.
Yeah.
Because I mean her character and stuff is all her, but just some of her matches and some of the girls I'm trying to say off the top of my head. I get Let me just say this. When I was in two of my favorite women wrestlers was Sherry Martel and Luna Vachon,
Yeah.
but they made you believe it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was in Memphis for the old USWA, it was Miss Texas and Dirty White Girl. They weren't having matches, but they were having fights. And oh my God, when I saw those two, I said, all of us guys got to up our game. They made you believe it.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my goal, is to get everyone go out there and you make them believe it.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be phony.
Mm-hmm.
Don't look like some choreographed Cirque du Soleil.
Right.
You go out there and make them believe it. And I'm not saying kill each other, but if anything happens, say you're sorry in the back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's always about me. Make them believe it. Make it. It's our job to suspend their belief for a few hours, even though the curtain's been pulled wide open.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's never going to go back the way it used to be, but it's still our job to close that curtain.
Yeah.
And suspend their belief for a few hours, because when the fans see something that looks so phony and choreographed and ridiculous, you can even hear them say, "Oh, come on."
Yeah.
They want us to suspend their belief still.
Yeah.
It's our job. So
Yeah.
that's my main focus.
Yeah. And I think there are ways to do that, Jerry. I think there are. I mean, I think that, as a fan back in the 90s, when Vince did that and he pulled the curtain back, I was disheartened. I mean, we always knew something, but when you do that, it's like, okay, the Wizard of Oz. You've just shown
Well,
me,
yeah. And plus, like, even when that masked magician came out with all those specials, The Secrets of Magic, I refused to watch it. I don't want to know.
Yeah.
But even like in wrestling, I know it's never going to go back to what it used to be. We should be closing the curtain. And instead of inviting everyone in, I tell the wrestlers, and I say it in seminars, years ago, behind the curtain was our sacred ground.
Yeah.
It's not our sacred ground anymore. Everyone's inviting everyone in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And don't air our dirty laundry in the public. Now
Yeah.
you look like a bunch of immature children.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's keep the mystique up. I was taught, never let them know the real you unless you meet them obviously in a supermarket or something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's why, I do respect AEW tremendously. I was very happy when the formation occurred. But again, guy like MJF, who I don't know if he's a real jerk or not. I can't tell. So he does such a good job, you know. I believe that he believes that's who he is 24/7.
That's,
But then
yeah.
again, that comes to mind, and but again, it's who comes to mind. So, for me, he's one of the few that comes to mind in the whole wrestling landscape across the board. So hopefully I'm there with you. I hope that they can come up with new creative ways to blur the line between reality and fantasy and really get you thinking, hold on a second. It wasn't, I don't know anymore. That's
Yeah.
that's what
Yes.
MMA does.
Yep.
So
That's our job.
yeah. So
I'll tell you this. I wrestled Elijah. It was Elijah Burke. Was he the Pope years ago?
okay.
Anyway, I wrestled him on an indie show out at the ECW arena, where I can't remember what indie it was, but he wanted to work my leg. We worked my leg the match. Anyway, at the end of the night, when I went to go to the gimmick table to get my pictures, I was still limping in case any fans were still in the building. And this older gentleman came up to me. He's probably in his 50s at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he shook my hand and he said, "I just want to thank you for suspending my belief tonight."
Mm-hmm.
And that's the greatest compliment I could ever have gotten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It truly is amazing. Pro wrestling has the ability. It's really unique in the sense, Jerry. For me, it's better than a movie. It's better than a rock concert. It's a seminar. It's sport. It's entertainment, all rolled up. But the reach the platform that it gives anybody in that industry is phenomenal.
Well, and it's live theater in the round improv with the fans. It's a give and take relationship with the fans. It's a unique relationship, because the rowdier the fans are, the more we're willing to kill ourselves. And I have met people when they find out I used to wrestle. They go, "Well, I don't get pro wrestling. What's so great about it?" And I say, "Well, where else can you go? Jump up and down, yell and scream at the top of your lungs, verbally abuse people, and
Yeah.
not get kicked out." And we
Right.
highly encourage that activity.
Yeah.
You can't do that anywhere else. Nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. You can't. And in terms of kids, Jerry, because you're there, you're living it, you're seeing them at the arenas. Are the young kids still there, or are the demographics still late teens, 20s now? If you see any kids come back, or what's the landscape look like in terms of demographics now in the
Oh
audience?
there's still kids. Yeah. And of course it depends on, especially indies. Are you a deathmatch company? I think there'll be less killed kids there
Yeah,
if their parents are smart, but I
yeah,
don't know. I
yeah,
was shocked at some of the ECW shows that how young the kids were that parents would bring to ECW. I was just,
yeah.
but
Yeah, it is a shock. All right, Jerry, one last question, because I always ask this to all my guests. In your opinion, what is the meaning of life?
oh Lord.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
The meaning of life.
yeah.
Golly. I think I'm still trying to figure it out. I think part of it is having a job where you wake up and look forward to going to work. Because
Mm,
I always said if I had a job, and I've had dozens of different jobs, I never want to wake up every day going, God, I don't want to go to work today. That's no way to live.
mm, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you there. Um, you've got to find something that you're passionate for, that will make you the best you.
And I was taught by my mom, treat everyone else like you would want them to treat you. The world would be a great place. But sadly it isn't. But
Mhm,
it's that simple. Treat everyone like you'd want them to treat you.
mhm. Yeah, absolutely. But Jerry, you've got a nice, a wonderful personality as well. I just have to ask, are you a man of faith?
Yes.
Okay, it comes across very, very much so.
I'm
So,
not perfect, but I am. Yes, yes,
yeah, well, one.
definitely. And that's another part of the secret of life.
Mhm.
But not everyone believes that. They got to find what works for them, I guess. But
Yeah,
I am, and it's it keeps me in check.
yeah.
So,
Well, amen to that, because like I said, it comes across you truly are, an inspiring individual, and I know you're doing, everything you can to help the business, and you've certainly been a blessing to this show here, today. Jerry, stay on the line. I'm just going to say goodbye to the viewers.
alrighty.
Thank you very much for joining us today. Unfortunately, one of my lights went out, so if you only see me half lit like the moon, that's why. But this has been Jerry Lynn. It's been a true pleasure sharing this conversation with you, gaining some insights, and learning a lot more about your career. Everybody out there, victor what you must victor in your life. I'm Amir. This is Jerry Lynn, and this has been Victoire. Until next time.